Yeah, it's Jim Har here. And this is part 2 of the interview that I did with Nathan. Be a bit longer. I realize this isn't easy for a lot of people to hear, but I just hope everybody can listen in a way that you can think a little bit about where he's at, what he's been through, the difficulties he's had in his own childhood, that I think he realizes he needs to work on recovery there as well. So let's remember that when people are in the middle of a living hell, the living hell that to varying degrees is the reality, the pain, what's protected against, what's denied and what's addicted to on both sides of a trauma bond. Both sides in a toxic, trauma-bonded relationship. And I don't mean to imply at all that the trauma bond has the same dynamics or the same degree or gradation of woundedness, or that both people in the dynamic of a trauma bond are exactly the same. It doesn't mean that it's all the other person's issues. It doesn't mean that the person who's the ex of somebody presumed to have BPD, who fits all the traits really, and then some, or maybe a comorbid diagnosis. But let's remember that none of us is perfect, and lots of people, millions of people, really sadly and tragically, are in about the same situation with different details, but the same place as Nathan is right now. Which I believe, though it doesn't come through as much his sadness, there is pain and loss and sadness that's still being protected and covered by anger. And so remember, underneath what might sound angry or hit you in many different ways, there is a man in pain here. And his pain is not just, it's twofold, right? It's childhood unresolved pain, and it's pain from adult relationships and this most recent one. And in these relationships, it's not that one person is all right and the cluster B is all wrong, or that one person is all perfectly fine and the cluster B is the only unhealthy aspect or the only hurting person in these types of trauma-bonded, toxic relationships. And so now picking up from where the interview left off with Nathan in part 1, here's part 2.
And I never go through the steps, we never go through the steps of getting therapy, of getting counseling, or getting any type of help to change the course of that thought process. And that's my responsibility, I feel, to a certain degree, where I'm not able to let go of that anger. I'm not willing to let go of what she's done. So it's like I want you back so bad, but when you get back, because that's where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be with me. But when you come back, I'm fucking pissed off about everything that you've done to me.
Well, and it sounds like some of that, so that is a human response. And the other thing is, there's something. What do you think? Do you think there's a part of you that not only you're angry about what's happened, but a part of you that still feels like you need to protect yourself at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's always been there because I've never married this woman, and I've gotten her rings before, which she ended up pawning, by the way. I've gotten her rings, but I never wanted to marry her. I just knew that if I married her, she would pummel me. She would take everything that I own. I would be stuck paying for alimony or some nasty business for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
She would take my Social Security, whatever it might be. And I just knew better than to ever go there with her.
Well, and that's saying something, because there's some gut instinct knowing and some kind of you really held firm to that. I wanted to ask you, when you were talking to yourself almost out loud in the car that time, and feeling almost some peace. I wonder, this might sound like a weird question, but what part of yourself do you think that was really leading the way there?
My logical side, not my emotional side. There was a little bit of emotion in it, but because I started to feel like this relief come over me, like we've let some of this go. We can just, it's okay. You don't need to hold on to this. Just let it go.
So can
just relax? And it was like almost a calming.
So can I ask you, who were you actually saying to? Who were you saying that it will be okay to, that we can let go?
Myself.
Right, but I'm
talking to myself.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But what I'm trying to ask you about is that we have parts of self.
And who was the person
Like, because
I don't know.
because
It's
what? Well, okay, sorry. I just wanted to say, because what I'm hearing, and some of what you're saying, well, a lot of what you're saying, I hear, anger at times, and then I hear, pain and other things. And what I'm hearing is sort of like a wounded, not that you're sounding like a child, don't get me wrong, but I'm hearing like that there's a really wounded, sad little boy inside of you from way back.
Yeah, I bet you that's probably the truth, AJ.
And that little boy is the part of you that the trauma bond transfers, you see, because the trauma bond goes back to the little boy, what happened with your dad. I don't know how you feel your relationship was like with your mother, but the trauma bonded nature of either one or both of those relationships in your early years, that little boy is still in that space. And then what happens often for people, even after all you've been through, and being still wanting this person, or part of you still wanting this person, that's coming from that inner child part that's looking for something familiar that's not resolved yet.
I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. I know that there's an inner child in me that's been traumatized, and I can't pinpoint when or how or where the source of it is, because it's so convoluted. There's so much of it. I mean,
Yes.
There's so much wreckage and damage from so many incidents in my childhood that I can't pinpoint when or where it started or how to even fix it.
Well,
It's there.
Yeah, and that's a whole process unto itself. But the reason I bring it up is because this is what's sort of leading you. Aside from maybe there's a few, male grown-up reasons, but this is the impetus of what is emotionally leading you to not be able to free yourself at this point yet from saying, that's it, the door's closed, I have to move on, because you are still, in a way, not only does that, little guy inside of you need you now, but you're not putting yourself first in any of this, and you're still in this danger of going around it again, and this is something that is, it sounds like it's very much from your childhood, but more importantly, how do you ever get to really know you and to help that little child inside of you heal, and how do you ever really get to being the man you want to be, and I'm not saying you're not a man, but be the man you want to be, and be living and show your sons what you want to show your sons. I mean, how do you get to that if you don't break away from this, which is really hard and painful, to be able to do that work on yourself, to be able to grow forward, to not really, so changing your life not only for you first and your children, but also so that you are not ever with another cluster B woman.
And that's also my fear, too, is I'm going to end up with another cluster B.
Well, and can I just say, with all due respect, without this healing process and recovery work I'm talking about, the chances are you will.
I'm going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the last thing on earth you need.
How do I begin to even heal something like this? I mean, really, what steps do I take to even begin to even heal that inner child, or to even start a dialogue with myself to start moving in a positive direction on that front? Well,
and that's what I help clients with, because there's a real process to that. And what I find most people need is, some guidance and some help with that. And also, it's a process where it's hard to go there by oneself, is what I'm trying to say, right? So really, it's like when I work with clients on this, it's helping them to get in touch with that inner child, process the emotions. There's various different processes that I use to do that. So it's not something really that people can do on their own.
Let me ask you something, AJ. I feel like I'm giving you something. I want you to give me something in return. Not
Yes.
that you haven't.
Right.
Of all the people that you talk to in all of these scenarios, let's say 10 is the worst. Where am I rating on that scale? Where's my situation with this woman? My whole overall scenario with this woman, where do you think is rating on the scale? Because I can't see it. I can't see how bad it is.
Well, with all due respect, I would say you got a full alarm fire. It's like, if you want to measure 1 to 10, I would say you're at 10. You've been at 10 for years, actually. And you have been sacrificing yourself and being caused more and more pain, and kind of reaching out to try to help her, while abandoning yourself and that little wounded inner child inside of you. So I would say 10. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. AJ, I've been doing this for so long.
Well, yeah.
I've been Superman for so long.
Mm.
And I've been told it's all my fault every time. It's always me. And I believed it for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
I believed it. I've been told since I was a little boy, just look at him. Just look at him. Look at the look on his face. He's evil. Teachers, therapists, district attorneys, judges. I mean, I was a teenager. I was 13 years old in court one time, and a district attorney said those exact words. Just look at his face. Just look at him.
Were they? Let me just clarify. Were they talking about you when they said those things?
Yeah, they were talking about the look on my face, who I am as a person. I've had police pull me over and say, "Can you even spell your name, you stupid fucking spick? Put dipshit in the back of the car. Put this moron fuck in the back of the car." And I'm 12, 13 years old.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
This is in California.
So sorry to hear that because
my mom, I'm Hispanic. I don't even look it. My mom's full-blooded German, blonde hair, blue eyes. I don't even look Hispanic. But I always had to mask my last name. We were never allowed to tell people about our Hispanic background because my mom used to say, they'll judge you. They'll treat you like you're a fucking moron. They'll treat you like you're stupid. I got railroaded into special education when I was a child.
Wow.
Because of my last name.
And so when your mother...
It's been my whole life.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. And when your mother was telling you that, which you know, I'm sure there was some truth to that, but the way she was saying it too, well, you know, what was your relationship like with your mother in terms of like, was it like sort of not always consistent, or was it because I don't know how old you were when she was telling you those things, but the way she was telling you them.
No, it's been since kindergarten.
Wow,
I can remember going all the way back to kindergarten.
Because that must have been terrifying to hear, not only the reality of that for so many people, but the way that your mother was telling you wasn't sort of like, you know, like a caring, kind, sort of, you know, protective way.
Right, but it's a caring, kind, protective way, but it's a bomb on top of it, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's so negative, and it creates such a stigma of yourself, like, oh, I guess I'm less than the rest of the kids because I'm half Hispanic, living in Iowa.
And while I realize that probably, you know, has some really sad and unfortunate, tragic truth to what goes on and is still going on, and not just in America, but maybe especially, I'm asking you is, do you think that there would have been a kinder sort of joining with you way for your mother to have educated you about that as opposed to throwing it at you that way?
I think she was trying to protect us.
Yeah.
But I think also my mom used to do a lot of things, I think, that were... We'd be driving down the street, there'd be a go-kart on the side of the road, and, Mom, can we go look at it? Yeah, let's go look at it. I'll even write down the phone number. We get home, Mom, you gonna call him? Stop bugging me. Just leave me alone. I'm on the phone. Shaw. Stay away. Okay, Mom, are you gonna call on that now? It's been 2 hours later. No, just stop bothering me. And eventually you just leave it alone because you knew it was bullshit from the get-go. You know? And this is where I read something the other day that I thought was really interesting, and maybe you can shed a little light on this, but I felt that this was pretty apropos to my situation, and I sent it to her. I don't think she was very appreciative of it, but I've been really trying to get her to help me get through some of this, and to try and pinpoint where this may have started. Here's how it goes. Males who were abused verbally, emotionally, or physically by their dads when they were young tend to pedestalize their mothers because they see her as being the lesser of the two evils. These males grow up to bond with BPD females and want to blame their abusive fathers for that poor romantic choice, but they're chasing down the wrong rabbit hole and will never dismantle their attraction to borderlines as long as this ideation is in place. BPD and our attraction to borderline disordered partners is directly due to bonding difficulties with the maternal object, mommy, in the first weeks of their life outside the womb. It is never, ever due to how abusively we were treated by our fathers. There are some critical critical questions to ask that may help you get this straight to yourself. For number one, how is it that your father turned into an angry, abusive, perhaps alcoholic man? Was this the guy your mom chose to marry? Did she actually fall in love with a monster and decide to have children with it? Who do you think actually lit your father's flame? How do you think she spoke to and interacted with him behind closed doors? That could have made him feel diminished, ashamed, never good enough, unable to ever please her. Number two, where was your mom when your dad was physically or emotionally beating up on you? What do you remember of what she was doing while you were subjected to this abuse? Did she ever try to intervene and take you away from the pain he was inflicting? Did she ever take a firm stance with him and say, if you ever do that again? Did she even consider leaving that supposedly abusive male in order to take you to safety? In short, what did she do to protect you, her precious darling baby? And I'll be honest with you, she was married to him for 1 year, divorced him, and then was with him for 15 years after that. And the abuse was there the whole time.
Well, and I think yes, it's really to focus on the point of that. It is very true, because fathers are important too, but the mother is the most important when an infant is born, and what happens. So it sounds like, and maybe can't go back that far, like in memory, but what happens in attaching and attunement and bonding, and it sounds like that might well have been your original trauma bond. And then what's added to that in your childhood by what happens with your father, not to say that your mother's all responsible for that, but yeah, she's responsible for her choices. But then what happened in her family, where her choices were leading her because of unresolved childhood issues as much as other people's are. And I'm not saying that, that people have responsibility, but people often don't know. But the bottom line is, yes, these issues, I know. How does it go usually? People will often say, women will often be more attuned in a way to realizing what didn't happen with their mothers, or how angry they are, what they need, and what didn't happen. And I think a lot of men have been told or have this idea that for the boy growing up, dad is most important. And I mean, mom and dad are both important, but mother is everything at the beginning of life that's going to dictate and shape or misshape or destroy how bonding and attachment happens. And that's where the original core wounds come from. And then what your father did later, what happened to your father, that adds on top of everything. And her not protecting you, there's both those things. And then all that did to you, and how that hurt you, and how you were not, you weren't being protected. And the way you describe your mother, about like seeing the cart on the side of the road and then mentioning it later and no follow through, it sounds very much like she was not so dissimilar in inconsistencies and temperament than perhaps the women that you've had relationships with.
And that's how and I think there's a very specific reason that my thought process has always gone to, you're just like my mom. Mm-hmm. With my ex, you remind me so much of my mom. But it was her way, I think, of dealing with her own shame. But it was also part of the trauma bond she was giving him. Look at how horrible he was. Look at how great you are. I know you would never do something like this to me. You love me. He didn't love me. And I'm sure she's done the same thing with this new guy she's with. She's probably told him very similar stories as well.
Well, and it's very common, whether it's around that specific, issue or not, or place, or, but it's very common for them to say that the last guy was so extra horrible and lie about the last guy to the next guy. And these are actually the red flags that many guys ignore.
Absolutely. And I've watched enough of your videos to know that. But one of the things that my father said to me in a fit of anger one time, and let me just say this, I was raised, I've never heard my mother pass wind, I've never heard my mom burp. My mom always came off as such a lady, like a little lamb, just perfect in every way.
Right.
But my dad said something to the effect of one time, your mom fucked everybody in the band. And I was like, what? And I think I must have been about 15, 16 years old when he said this.
Right.
And I just brushed it off because I didn't want to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this to her attention recently. When this whole thing happened with my ex leaving, I brought it to her attention that he had said this. And she, of course, denied it. Okay?
Yeah.
But I suspect she's still just a human being, despite the fact that she's my mom and she's the salt of the earth to me. She's still just a human being with desires and malfunctioning thought processes. Why wouldn't she be susceptible to all the same things as the rest of us?
Mm-hmm.
And her father, she didn't believe was her actual father. She believed her mother got pregnant from the golf pro, but her mom was like this, my grandmother was like this very cold, icy type of woman that was not affectionate at all. And I didn't really have a relationship with this woman at all. She would send birthday cards every year. She would just sign her name, never put any money in it. And I eventually just started throwing her cards in the trash because it's like, you don't even call me. I don't even know who the hell this person is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have to look in the card to know that there's nothing in it besides just a signature. So I think it's very possible. My mother may have characteristics or traits of borderline personality as well, or something similar to that. My mom's always been very antisocial. She doesn't like to go places. She doesn't like crowds. She's a creature of comfort. She likes to come home from work, crawl into bed with a bag of potato chips and a can of Coke, just like Molly. Okay? Very lazy in that sense. We never went on vacations. We never went anywhere. People didn't come over. Our birthdays, nobody was ever allowed to come over. I'm not feeding everybody. I'm not feeding the whole neighborhood. Yeah, she had the money. She could have. But she never did.
Well, and she didn't seem to have the ability to be present or to be giving, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, it seems like she's always willing to take my call, and all of my siblings call her repeatedly throughout the day. She takes everybody's calls all the time. She never abandoned any of us like she's done. But my mom is very out of sight, out of mind. I ended up homeless in Vegas when I was in my early 20s, like 21, 22 years old. And I said, Mom, can you send me some money? I'm homeless. And she's like, oh, honey, I just don't have it. Well, Mom, can you send me $30?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, honey, I just don't have it. Can you send me $10? Sorry, honey, I just don't have it. Next thing you know, I get out of jail. I end up down at her house in Louisiana. She's getting ready to go on a cruise with my sisters and with a limo picking her up. I said, Mom, you didn't have $10 to send me? Well, I'm not going to be paying for all your mistakes, honey.
Mm.
I was homeless. I was washing myself up in a bathroom at a hospital, a public bathroom.
Well, and I mean, that's another abandonment. And it just seems like it might be a very telling... It seems like there's a pattern there with your mother that's telling in terms of what she could give or couldn't give, or chose not to give, or didn't care to give.
See, this is what I mean. There's so many of these. And there's more. There's much more.
Well, and I think what you're sharing with me now is like really indicative of, and this is the way it lines up. So it's not your fault. I'm not saying that, but when there's all this unresolved stuff in the family of origin, you probably haven't been able to self-differentiate, so you don't know who you would be outside of the roles and the way that the family operated. And then people are just, unfortunately, I don't like this word, but sort of rather destined to go to the next person that's just like that parent, because there's actually in the inner child aspect of self this desire and hope that finding familiarity, even if it's awful in a large part, is going to be what rescues that child inside of you. But it never works that way.
It's also complicated, AJ. It's just so incredibly distorted and complicated. And as I dig deeper into all this psychological crap, I just think to myself, my God, all the magic in the world is disappearing. It's just disappearing. There's no magic left in the world. Well, everything is explainable by some psychosis or another.
Well, and can I just ask you, what does magic mean to you?
Falling in love with somebody. Having those butterflies in your stomach when you just want to be near that person, and it just clicks and it's all magical. It's not magical. There's nothing magical about it. It's dysfunction that's causing those senses of magic. It's the ideation. It's the honeymoon phase. It's all that stuff that makes it feel like it's so heightened. It's really just garbage. It's just toxicity.
And I think what you're describing is that that pull, which is often from the inner child part of self, but that pull toward what is familiar, only what is familiar has been horrible and hurtful in the past, to say the least, and that sort of magic that people think they feel, or that this is my soulmate, etc., is really the addicted nature of down deep inside emotion, the addictive nature to everything familiar, trauma, being helpful and self-sacrificing to someone who isn't showing you anything near healthy love.
And why is it that people who receive all this goodness from somebody just choose to be so dark and vicious with that power? Why is it that a borderline feels it necessary to continue to live this way? Is there nothing inside them that says, I really like this and I don't want to continue to go back to the darkness. I want to feel okay again in life. I want to stay in this light. I want to build on this. Is there nothing inside them that can ask these questions of themselves?
No, because
say these things to themselves.
Because like what I've been talking to you about for yourself, right? And well, you look at the other side. So people with BPD and or more or other things going on with that at the same time, they come from pasts, usually in a high percentage. They come from pasts and families of origin where they were, abused. They were, all kinds of bad things happened. Dysfunctional families where their needs weren't met, and they don't know. So they lose themselves, literally. They don't know who they are. They're full of all kinds of primal rage and or hatred for parents and all of this really distressing stuff too. And then what happens is they don't trust anything. They don't trust anyone. They try to reach out for what they think they want, but it's sort of like the nicer one is, the more one tries to love someone with untreated BPD and or BPD, NPD, comorbid, or NPD, that what happens is they have no place inside where they can even know what that is. So it comes to them as a triggering threat. So they don't even get to appreciate it. They don't take that in. And it takes a lot of work for them in therapy to be able to, learn why that is and sort of unlearn some things and learn some other things to change that. But even until a certain point, and it's really way far down the road to recovery and therapy for people on that side of the fence, even then they still will grapple with trying to feel like they're worth being cared about or being given anything. Because essentially the separation from self is so complete that they hate themselves, but they're actually not even hating a known sense of self. And I know that might sound a little psychobabbly, but they don't experience people's love and people's kindness the way that people would hope they would, and the way that people mean them to, the way that maybe other people who didn't have, this kind of dysfunctional childhood, etc., and all that goes with it, they don't take it in at all. And this is why I'm always talking about how they really don't attach and how they really don't love. And I take the most heat in the world for that from people with BPD who will constantly come by and say how crazy I am, and then I'll go watch some people's with BPD's channels where, some of the more honest ones, younger people out there, just tell them, this is what my life is like with borderline personality, and they are just totally telling the truth, about what they did to the last boyfriend, or what they did to this person, or if you do this to me, I'll do this to you. So they just they're living from a false self too, and they don't know.
And that's what that's what I fell in love with is the false self, didn't I? It's not the real her.
Well, I think you fell in love with who you thought she was, but it turned out it was a false self, but you didn't know that.
And so what you're saying is they're not capable of love.
Well, not unless until they get a lot of therapy and change a lot. That like unlearn. So working through what happened to them in childhood and unlearning that all that was, painful and not love, etc. And then what it really requires in that process for people with BPD is that they have to come to this and remember this screechingly horrible and place that feels like it's going to kill you, where you have to really realize that you weren't loved as a child in most cases, or many, or mine anyways, I can say. And these parents are just not capable of love, so you never learned anything about that. You never had that model to whatever you thought love was was actually this chaotic, abusive, just unending drama, turmoil, and, stuff like that. So it's really hard, because then that's where a big crossroads in BPD recovery is separation individuation, which is really supposed to take place when someone is around 2. But I got that work done when I was like about 30 in therapy. Point is, we can go and get this help, but it is so hard to go through, to not run away from, because it's just the primal woundedness. Just, you feel like you're going to die. So that's what's going on that side, and they have to go through a whole lot of work to really, and they have to really want to be able to unlearn some things, and then learn about healthier relating. And that only can come too when they find themselves, the lost part of self, which is, harrowingly difficult emotionally also to endure. I went through a lot of dissociation, a lot of panic, there's a lot that they would have to go through and unlearn and learn. And it's really a difficult process. No kidding. You gotta, I wanted it I wanted more than anything in the world. So that every day when I thought it was going to kill me, I'm like, well, if it's going to kill me, it's going to kill me. But if it doesn't kill me, I'm going to find my way out of this. So that's why I'm also talking about, if somebody doesn't have the singular focus for themselves of wanting to get this treatment and go through it no matter what, they're not going to get it done. Can't do it for somebody that you're promising. Can't do it for a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, somebody. They can't do it to save a family. They have to want it for themselves.
Right, and I've gathered that as well. Because I am codependent, I'm somewhat manipulative, and I think I was very manipulative in the email, saying, "Look, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want anything to do with you. The kids don't want anything to do with you. Until you're knocking on this door looking for real help." And the reality is, she shouldn't even be knocking on the door. She should just go check herself into a hospital. That's the reality.
Well, because I just say,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt. Can I just say that if she came to your door, knocking on your door to say she wanted real help, A, she's probably lying. B, it's a desperate attempt to start the cycle again. And I just can't tell you how many times people have told me this, and people come back and they try again, and they never do follow through in the therapy. They might go for a little while, but they're not engaging it. And so it's a lot to ask yourself, I think, to risk all that would be risking. No, if she, and here's the other thing. Okay, so it sounds like there's a process that would really benefit you in your healing. Because the other thing about all of this that's hard to see from your vantage point is that even if she went now, and say 10 years later, because it could take that long, she's a really different person. She's more like who you thought she really was. Well, you have to live your life. You have to heal. You have to move on. And I just want to say that in 25 years online and 30 years approximately total in working with people on both sides of this issue and other things, not one person ever came back and said, that person, even if somebody went to treatment, nobody's ever said, so, and then the marriage or the relationship worked out. Including in my own life and my own example, because I know in my life, I'll just share this with you, that I was in a 13-year relationship when I was in, the bulk of a lot of the recovery. And when I was starting to really make progress and I was really changing, I had a partner that wasn't working on themselves. And I looked over there one day and I was like, what am I doing with this person? And so as they weren't growing, whatever their issues were, I have some ideas, but I don't know. And as they weren't growing or changing, and I was growing and changing, then suddenly I was like, I don't want to be with this person. And that can happen both ways. That can happen one way or the other. But see, who this person really is right now versus who you thought she was, and where you have lost so much of yourself and what you need to do for you and for your children, is like the twain is unlikely to ever meet, even if you go through your healing recovery journey and she was to show up at your door all, different and recovered, it'd be pretty hard to move forward anyway.
Because we'd already changed so drastically that the same person that we were with is no longer there anymore.
Right. And then if one shows up, recovered, let's say, if one shows up recovered, and let's say it's the person who had BPD shows up recovered, but say someone in your position, codependency and all that you've been through in your life, if you haven't got to a certain place, then things are going to reverse in a way where that person's going to be like, you're not meeting, like you're still going to have incompatibility and still not, it's different. But two people, so for healthy relationships to really work, which they take work and, nurture and care, two people have to be independent enough and healthy enough to come together to create interdependence, not codependence, enmeshment, or toxic, or trauma bonds. But it's nobody's completing anybody here. And then there has to be compatibility. So everybody has some kind of little issues at the least, right? And so even in the healthiest of relationships, it's not that people are perfect. It's that whatever their issues are, first of all, they're taking personal responsibility. They are two separate people, and they know where they begin and the other, where they end and the other begins. There are boundaries. And there's a coming together that isn't reliant. It's not like a fit that says, I'll do this for you, and maybe subconsciously, I'll do this for you and you do this for me. And it's not a familiarity necessarily with, you're just like my dad, you're just like my mom. It's seeing that person for who they really are, and then seeing, are we compatible or not? All of that's missing, unfortunately, when and it's not your fault, but with your background and what you still have to work on and recover if you want to, like if you I'm not trying to, to tell you what to do.
I am. No, I'm in therapy, and I need to get this out of me. I just
yeah.
can't live like this anymore.
And then there's her stuff and her whole legacy, and she needs to work on that. And so, yeah, I think it's the trauma bond connection, and it's also that pull from the past, from the inner child, seeking the same, repetition of the same cycle that's familiar. But familiarity sometimes is the worst thing in the world for someone, for many people.
Can I also say that I'm going to be really transparent with you. I'm scared to death of healing myself. I'm scared to death because I will probably end up not wanting anything to do with her, and I know that that's my freedom. That's my way out of this. Mm-hmm. But in a certain sense, I'm scared to give it up. I really am. There's something inside me that just is terrified of losing this person out of my life for good.
Well, and can I just say that likely is twofold. It's you feeling that way, and it's that inner child feeling that way, and it's about her, and it's about, will you lose your mother too?
Odds are I'm going to lose both of them.
Well, but I meant in the sense of, like, the emotional connection or
I know.
The trauma bond with your mother. So, yes, I'm sorry to hear what your mother's going through. And but the point is, I meant emotionally in that sort of individuation or differentiation away from the family system. So, even if your mom was, say, healthier or younger or that wasn't happening, that's part of what I think the fear is. And then to know that you are from childhood and what you went through and that emotional, and then it's the literal loss of her too. That's, in the future.
Right.
But this is
and also...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It's fine.
Real quick, I just sent you an email with some photos that I want you, if you have a chance to take a look at. If you could, while we're on the phone, I'd love your analysis of it.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now.
One of those are all pictures of her in a sketch. Holly's very artistic and very creative. She can make all kinds of stuff creatively. She can't hold a job. She doesn't know how to manage money. She doesn't know how to grocery shop. She doesn't know how to cook anything. Her sense of style is all over the board. But there's a sketch that she drew there, and I'm sure if you look at it, I think that's what she really feels like on the inside all the time.
Yes,
she drew that.
Wow, that's very hard to look at because that's so much pain.
Yeah. And she has said many times, I'm so tired of being the fool. I'm so tired of playing the fool. So tired of my life being a mess. Before she left, or when she came in July and talked to us, she said, I feel so small when I'm around you. I feel so insignificant when I'm around you. And I said, why? Why? She said, because you're just so much stronger than I am. And I said, but I'm supposed to be. I'm the man, and it's okay. Why can't I be? Why can't you just look at me as your king? And why can't you just be my queen? Why can't we just respect each other's roles here? And she hugged me and she kissed me and she held my hands. And then when she left to drive back to Indiana with this guy, she sent a message the following morning at 4 a.m. stating, well, I made it home at 4 a.m. Just wanted to let you know, thank you for letting me see the kids. And it was cold. I said, so now we're back to being cold? I said, what about the kissing and the hugging? She's like, I didn't kiss you. You kissed me. And don't even try that. I told my boyfriend, because we have a very open and honest relationship, what you did. And I just thought to myself, that is not at all how it went down. You wrapped your arms around me and you said, you've lost so much weight. It feels so weird to hug you like this. I've lost, since she left, I've lost 60 pounds. When she left me in 2015, I lost 100 pounds.
And can I just ask
but you can see in those pictures.
Yeah,
but pictures right there. She's got the peach-colored shirt on with her head resting on her arm.
Yep.
Right? You see that?
Mm-hmm.
That is when she was at her peak and she was the best mom ever. Okay? That was about 4 years ago. The other picture with her scrunched up face and the black sweater.
Yep.
That was right before she left me 3 months ago.
Yeah, and I was
The picture of her hugging the boys. That was in July when she came to visit. So last month. And you can see the blackness in her eyes that I'm talking about in that picture. You can see it.
Yes, totally. It's like you'd think that it was a totally different person.
Absolutely. And according to my mom, at for her wedding pictures, she's put weight back on. She looks great. She looks happy. She looks this. She looks that. And I just said to my mom, it's all a facade, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of the show.
Well, that is very just looking at the one picture to the last picture I can't imagine how heartbreaking that would be for you, because it's just painful for me to even look at, and I don't even know her.
We've lost somebody that is. I mean, I look at it like a heroin addict. That's what it looks like. I mean, that's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody that is so addicted to their own chaos that you just cannot stop them, make sense to them, intervene. You know, I have to play like the parent, and I've always been her parent. She never had a parent. I am her dad. She's already said that I'm pretty much like the equivalent of her father or her parent. I've had to tell her throughout this whole relationship, honey, you gotta wake up, you gotta go brush your teeth before you go to bed.
Right.
It's every night. Her personal hygiene has gotten out of control where she doesn't shower for 3-4 days at a time. Hi, honey, you gotta go take a shower. Come on. Don't tell me what to do. You're not my parents.
Well, and of course
It's been like this since day one.
She was totally relating to you, like, from that child, that wounded, damaged child, emotionally, as if you were her parents, plural, and then, she resents it because, well, and the reason that happens is because they actually still want what they needed so long ago. They want it from the original parents, and that's another reason why there's splitting and devaluing, because no matter how much you helped her and you loved her and you did all that for her, it could never be, quote, good enough, unquote, because you're really not the real deal, right? Even though she was transferring that onto you, projecting that onto you, without knowing it, by the way. Yeah. I mean, it just... What do you think, as, we've talked about this and you've been sharing what's happened, is sort of like, or parts of what's happened. So when you said you need to get this out of you, does that give you any idea about whether she ever knocked on the door again, you could open it, or what is that? What do you think about that?
If I got it out of me, and I mean, let me just break down what getting it out of me means to me.
Yes, that's
getting
good.
it out of me means I didn't know I was codependent until this happened. I considered myself a very alpha male, in control of myself. I know who I am. I've been touting that my whole life. I know who the fuck I am.
Mm-hmm.
You don't tell me I know who the fuck I am. I'm stronger mentally than most of you people out there. That is not the case anymore. Because I'm realizing that there's a virus in my operating system that is making decisions for me that I am not cognizant of, and I'm going with it like it's still me. And a lot of these decisions, sometimes I can recall as I go back through it, I think to myself, yeah, there are some times when I've made decisions and I said to myself, man, that was really stupid. Why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. Are you sure this is the right thing? Too bad you made a decision as a man now. You live by it. You live by it because you made it.
And do you think so?
So
Who taught you that as a man you have to live by a decision that would be harder on you than what is a woman supposed to do?
I really don't know, but I've always and my mom has always said, I'm sorry if this offends you, I really am.
No, I'm not offended at all.
My mom said that I've always been very male chauvinist. And, in a world where there's feminism going on, you know what? I'm allowed to say that. I have always looked at women as being slightly inferior. And that might have something to do with my mom, which is strange because my mom used to tell me all the time, why is it that you feel that women are so inferior when you've watched your own mother hurdle so many obstacles and keep you alive and take care of your brothers and sisters as a single parent? And I have to look back, and my mom really, towed the line. She really worked hard to put food on the table as a single parent. Like I said, my dad was out of the picture when I was 9 years old. He died when I was 23. So she really became both roles, and I can see it now, and I don't know exactly why I became a male chauvinist or why I touted women as just being stupid or not too intelligent or incapable, so to speak. I don't know. I don't feel that way so much anymore, but in my younger years, most definitely. Back in the 90s where it was...
That might have just been a reaction to, your mother did some wonderful things to, keep you alive and help you survive and work and be both parents. But I think also the woundedness there, and also what, I don't know what kind of messages your mother gave you about what a boy and then growing into a man should be, but it sounds like a lot of, well, you let me just use the word, and I'm not saying this is fully applicable to you, but a lot of men who might think women are inferior, or if they are all the way to misogynist, which I'm not saying you are, it often is because of unresolved, like a lot of unresolved anger and things from childhood at mother. Men are encountering a lot of different challenges today because of toxic femininity and the sort of radical whatever wave they're in of feminism that I don't even understand as a woman. So I think it's a really...
I think that men are being demasculated on such a massive level now that we're kind of becoming, especially if you're white in America, I think the biggest underdog you can point out at this point is a white male.
Younger, like a younger millennial to whatever. Absolutely, yes. I have so many clients in that age bracket, and I've learned a lot about that.
They'll do it to themselves. And they'll do it to themselves publicly. They'll say, I'm just a dumb white guy, I'm just pathetic, and my girlfriend goes and sleeps with black guys, and, what can I do about it? There's tons of pornography out there where there's, coupled, where the husband is watching his white wife have sex with a black male. And this is like becoming really rampant in our society at this point. And a black comedian can get up on stage and talk a bunch of crap about whitey, or make his little jokes about the white guy, but then God forbid if a white man is ever to say anything derogatory in the opposite direction. And I think this is becoming very systematic in our society. It's becoming the breakdown of the white male in our society. And I'm not saying that I can't be. I'm not a racist. I'm Hispanic. How could I be racist? I mean, I guess I could be, but I'm not really racist. I'm just observing the facts as I see them.
Well, I think you're just talking about the sociological landscape that we're all trying to figure out what to do with.
It's just getting worse. It's just getting more convoluted.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
And you know what? It's sort of like that's what I always say is that's the macrocosm of what's happening, like what's happened to you in this relationship and two other prior, and what happened when you were a little boy. It's the macrocosm of more and more people's personal microcosm experience, and that so it's double whammy actually. But I think.
Let me ask you, AJ.
Oh, go ahead.
You don't feel that this is a salvageable situation in any way, shape, or form.
After all that you've been through, and whether or not she will get help, and boy, the journey that she would have ahead of her, I don't think that this is where it's like, people. You can never say never, but what I usually say about this is that you have to radically accept what is right now, and you have to, you know, have your own healing and recovery journey, and you have to take care of your kids, and you have to live life now. And so you can't know what's good, what may or may not happen 5 or 10 years from now. And so with that, it's radically accepting what is now and making decisions that are the healthiest for you and your children from that understanding of now. Because nobody can predict the future, but I would say that, yeah, the percentage chances are very extremely low that this would change, or that you would actually have, I was going to say back, but I guess have back in a sense who you thought she was, or have back that better part of herself that she can sometimes be, that tragically she just isn't really right now.
Right. Right. I have a prediction that I'm going to run by you that I think I just wanted to get your opinion on it, because she's left and come back so many times. Her adopted parents have basically done away with her too. They don't want anything to do with her anymore either. Mm-hmm. She has nobody except for this guy that she's with right now and one girlfriend. Right. And she claims she has all these new friends from church that this guy is ministering to, and he ministers in a garage somewhere with probably 6 to 5 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, different kind of church. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just pathetic. It's just, and there's nothing on the web about this guy. He's got warrants out for his arrest. It's really pathetic. Mm. My guess is, now that she has married him and she has him embedded, I'm curious how long it will take for him for her to start going through the devaluation process and discard, knowing now that she has a second option, which is to possibly come home. And I'm sure that my message to her yesterday saying, look, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Just get your ass home, knock on the door, and let's start this process of healing this mess. And I said, it's not going to be an easy road. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be on par with you becoming a bodybuilder. That's how much effort you're going to have to put into it.
Well, actually, it's probably 10 times what a bodybuilder does to be like Mr. Universe. But yes.
Really, it's that extenuating, or it's that much, difficult.
It is, because if you think about, your own recovery journey and what you need, that's not going to be easy either. And then there's you got to multiply that by a factor of what people with even more woundedness have to deal with, and when they've been running from it all their lives. So I think really what I hear is that you're telling her to just get home and, let's work this out, let's fix, go to therapy, etc. I really don't believe that's very, very realistic or very healthy for either of you, but especially you and your children.
Sadly enough, as I watch all these videos and I read all the stuff that I'm reading, it's all pointing right back to that. It really is. It's just pointing all back to, forget this and just work on yourself, because that's all you can do. And somebody said something recently to me that I thought was kind of profound. They said, when you realize that you have no control is when you have all control.
Because that realizing, when you surrender that, which is radical acceptance, when you surrender what you don't have control over and you accept what is, then you can finally focus on what you can create change in, which is you, your life, and your son's lives. But you don't have any control, or it's a helpless position to be in for anyone with someone like your ex there, because only she can make those choices, and she might not be capable of making those choices.
I don't know if she is or isn't. I did tell her that I filed for sole custody of the children, and I will be asking for child support one way or the other. I'm getting one or the other, and I don't know what that's going to do to her, but the last time we went through the court stuff, every time we go through this court stuff, it always backfires on her. She comes in ill-prepared. She's going to have 2 years of taxes that she's going to have to show up to court with in October. I haven't even had her served yet. The paperwork is sitting here, and I'm just going to wait to the last minute and have her served. I'm not going to give her an opportunity to prepare any type of case against me. She's not going to be able to afford an attorney if she can even make it to the court.
Well, yeah, and the only thing I would say about that, and of course you follow a lawyer's advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know if you have to wait that long, because if in fact she got it last minute and got any representation, they would postpone it. So, but you could check with your lawyer on that. But I think waiting is not really important because likely she's not going to get it together anyway. And then if you spring it on her and she gets any representation, like even
she's not going to be able to.
No, but even like, do they have in the courts there people that just like are
legal aid?
Yeah, legal aid, exactly.
Yeah.
So even if she grabbed a legal aid person, they would be able to postpone the court hearing if you were springing it on her. So you might want to, ask her, double check with a lawyer, but you might want to think about your strategy there. But don't take that advice from me because I'm not a lawyer.
Right. And the flip side to this too is, what is she going to accomplish by even going to court? She has nowhere to put the kids. She's not even living in the state. She has no home. This guy doesn't have 2 cents to rub together either. I don't know how they're surviving. I can tell you this: she hasn't made her car payment in 2 months because they call me every day.
Well, and
I think my name. I'm just a contact. But I'm watching what I knew was going to happen, which is that she cannot take care of herself. I am always the safeguard for all of the shit that rolls downhill. And I keep these things I keep all of this stuff in order so that this shit doesn't fall apart like this. But now as I'm watching this, she's got tickets that are coming in. She's got all kinds of crazy stuff coming in the mail, from the State Department of Corrections and Public Safety. They're stating that her tags on her car are being flagged, and so is her driver's license, because she doesn't have insurance on the car.
Well, right, and there's something else in all this. First of all, it's not your role or your job, and it's not healthy for you to be
not
the
anymore.
one. Yeah, right. So I hope you're not going to do that. Try to do that again.
He gets pulled over driving the car because he's been driving the car with no driver's license, and he gets picked up on those charges as well. The car gets impounded. What are they going to do then? She doesn't have the money to bail him out. Who's she going to call? She's going to call me. That's what she's going to call.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is what you need to prepare for, strategize about, and maybe hopefully get into the right position to do the healthiest thing for you and your children, and not, rescue her.
Right. Well, the sad thing is, once again, and I don't know if this is my codependency saying this or just my sense of empathy, she is just like a dumb child that just keeps digging this hole deeper. She has nobody. I mean, I'm telling you, AJ, she has nobody on this planet that will help her. Nobody. She's alienated every single person. Her adopted parents want nothing to do with her. They refuse to talk about her, talk to her. They want nothing to do with her.
So can I ask you this question then? Are you in the alienated camp with everyone else, or where do you think you are right now?
Well, the adopted parents, they I think have believed everything that she has said about me, and so they don't want anything to do with me, and that's fine. We're two different class of people. They're like white trash hillbilly kind of people in a small town. Although her adopted father and her brother are sheriffs in the town that she comes from. And the brother called me recently, and he says, look, I'm just returning your call, but let me just say that none of us want anything to do with her ever again. So I still have my family. And she considers my family her family, and she considers my mom basically her mom, because my mom has had a lot of heart-to-heart talks with her about being a good mother, being a good person. Mm-hmm. They did a lot of things with each other and helped each other in a lot of ways. And my mom has told her repeatedly, I love you. I do. I love you like you're one of my own daughters. But my mom's so incredibly disappointed in all of her behavior at this point.
Well, and what I actually meant was, where do you think you are? I didn't mean like to compare you with others or whatever, but where do you think you are in terms of being in or out of that camp of, like, are you going to be that one person for her, or are you going to sort of take care of yourself and your children, and she unfortunately will have no one, but that could be the impetus that could drive her in the right direction.
And that's what I kind of thought too, perhaps, and that was my next question for you, so I'm glad that you went there. My next question, and this is a burning question for quite a few of my cohorts that are in the same boat, that I've met on various forum boards dealing with the same situation. Can they reach a rock bottom? Because I have read, this is a very conflicting subject matter. Mm-hmm. That the only way the change is going to happen is if they hit a rock bottom, but I've read that they do not have a rock bottom.
Well, it varies. Some can hit a rock bottom, some will hit a series of rock bottoms, some won't survive rock bottom, and others will hit a rock bottom that will open up some awareness and at least make them start to seek something, meaning some help.